When you come into the world, we take on the identity of those who are more powerful than us. What we're looking for is a kind of person who is looking for meaning. What's the meaning of life? Why am I here?
Who was it that said, "I don't fear the man that practices 1,000 kicks one time. I fear the man that practices one kick 1,000 times"? Bruce Lee. And if you think about that, in our lives, we don't really have consistency in our faith. We bounce around from this preacher to that preacher to this to that to a meme we see on the internet, and we start following another person over here, another person over there. And I've said it before, consistency over intensity. I don't fear the man that practices 1,000 kicks one time. I fear the man that practices one kick 1,000 times. And if you think about it, let's just see how the devil looks at our faith. From church to church to church, to belief to belief to belief. The devil says, "I don't fear that man or that woman because they've practiced 1,000 religions one time instead of practicing one faith 1,000 times." That's confidence. And what is my father told about confidence? What does confidence mean? And he digs deep into the root of it, which is confideo, with fidelity. Con is with, and fideo is fidelity, with honor. You know what infidelity is. If you have fidelity to your Creator and you are faithful to your Creator like you're supposed to be with your spouse, that is practicing one kick 1,000 times and becoming so good at it that anyone would fear you, including the devil, because the devil has a choice, 7 billion or so choices every day where they're going to take that soul or how they're going to control that vessel to do the devil's deeds in order to try and take more souls. But if he comes across one man or one woman that has practiced that faith 1,000 times, it's like that story. Fear knocked at the door. Courage rose up to answer it. And when courage opened the door, no one was there. Because courage is such a powerful thing, and it's based in fidelity, honor, and true faith. So, I was thinking about that. I've heard these little sayings about consistency over intensity. Some of us, I remember when I learned how to pray, we were out in the ocean. It's like, really didn't have a reason to pray until I was about 10 or 11 years old. And we were in this huge storm. My brother David, who's going to talk next, he was there, and one of his friends was with. And it was a horrible storm. And my father was the captain of the ship, mighty little 36-foot, tiny little thing in the middle of the ocean. And I was laying in one of the bunks because my father says, "Go below, batten down the hatches." And the storm was huge. I remember looking out the window one time and all I could see was gigantic swells. And I thought to myself, we're going to die. And I was sucking my thumb until the skin came off almost. I was a little kid and I was afraid. And I promised God that if He let us get home safe, that I wouldn't suck my thumb anymore, because I was like 11 years old. And of course I lied, because I kept right on sucking my thumb, but we got home safe. But I remember the first time I felt a need to pray, because I was fearing for my life. And a lot of us, we wait to have an intimate prayer till we fear for our life. And what is that intimacy about? We think we know with our spouse. We call lust intimacy. But to me, when you are at your lowest low, at your highest fear, That is when you pray your hardest. And that's really not the right time. You need to really practice intimate prayer, or maybe it's just be still and know. Because some people say, whatever the prayer is they're trying to do with this is what they've seen as prayer, this is what they've been taught as prayer. And all it says is we keep saying it, be still and know. And really at the end of the day, most of us don't find the time to be still at all. We don't even know what stillness is. We're so busy distracting ourselves. Everything, it starts first thing in the morning with a nice cup of coffee for me. Feels so good. Tastes so good. And it's odd because if I indulge in that and have a second cup, I turn into a raging monster, which is bizarre. But I'm chemically altering myself. You know, we all joke about it. Actually, all these memes and these coffee cups, you know, how they have little sayings about I'm no good until I've had my first cup of coffee. Well, I just came back from China, and while I was in China, the coffee was terrible. They like tea there, all the tea in China. Right? The coffee was horrendous. It tastes like old socks that had been worn in the rice paddies and then squeezed out into a cup. And it was only brown because their boots were brown and the mud was brown. It was so bad. So I went a whole week without having coffee, and I came back. And I have this wonderful coffee machine that was a gift, so I just love it. It was free. It's my Jewish nature. And it made me a cup of coffee that just got me spinning. And then I had a second cup because it was so good. And man, was I a monster all day. And then I didn't eat because I medicated myself with one of those comfort foods or drinks. So alcohol, coffee, marijuana, cigarettes. I don't know, what's the difference between, you know, some people say, oh, smoke, it's just smoking, but smoking. They're both doing the same thing. They both have a drug in them. Anyway, I'll digress. The day went on, and I just was an ass. And I saw it a couple times. And I saw myself getting angry, and it was okay. It was okay. And I don't know why it was okay. And I thought to myself, because I'm in charge here. This is my company. This is in my own company. Why is it okay to be angry when you're medicated? Because you're farther away from God. When you medicate yourself with food, dessert, coffee, and look, we're all going to continue drinking coffee and eating food and eating dessert. We're all going to keep doing it. We can eat healthy desserts and still feel okay about ourselves for a few minutes, even if you create it. I love cooking. And when I make food, man, it's good. My kids love it. My wife doesn't like it so much, but she'll eat it because she's the chef of the house. So she doesn't usually like my food because there's a little competition thing there. But I will eat like a pig when I make my food, even if it doesn't taste good, truthfully. Oh, too much salt. I don't care. I'm going to eat it. I made it. But I'm trying to stay on track for you that we medicate ourselves driving nice cars, wearing nice suits. My favorite tie that I stole from my best friend about 10 years ago. I told him, I said, I'm taking this tie. He says, no, that's my favorite tie. I said, I don't care. You have to come 3,000 miles to get it. He hasn't come yet. Point is that when I wear my favorite tie, my favorite suit, I feel a little better about myself. People say, ooh, look at you. Even my friends that work here. We medicate ourselves 1,000 ways. Why? Because we want to feel like gods. We want to feel good about ourselves. Because we know deep down inside that we're just wretched souls trying to get through another day because we aren't close enough to God. It's tough to get close to God for a lot of us. And the reality is, it isn't tough. We make it tough. We rise the hurdles higher and higher and higher for our own selves, instead of just being still and yielding to God. We don't want to yield that power. I've been given this power today. It's mine. I'll do what I think is right according to me. We can say with our mind, we'll do what's right according to God, but watch the actions. The actions speak a lot louder than the words in our mind and our mouths. Actions speak loudest of all. So it's interesting how all of us, we love to medicate. And we just think, well, I have to eat. I have to eat. I have to nourish myself. Yet we're either too skinny because we're too emotional, or we're too fat because same thing, and we're hiding that emotion with food, or we're making ourselves feel good, feel good, feel good. So I went to China, and I was off coffee for a little bit. I felt pretty good. It felt odd because I kept having that craving for that thing I love so much. And I couldn't find it anywhere. Couldn't get my fix. And I didn't see a Starbucks anywhere. Till I went to Shanghai, and then it was like... Anyway, but I got off coffee, and then I came home, and then the second day when I came home, I had another cup of coffee. And I wasn't hungry. I was hungover from the long flights to get to China. So I didn't eat again, and all I had was coffee. And I became an ass again. I really think it's good to see yourself being an ass, because you can step back for a moment and go, am I going to defend that side of me that is an ass? Or am I going to say, no, I'm sorry for being an ass? So the person that I was first sorry for being an ass to was the lowest person on the totem pole in my world. And I was just an ass. So the next time I saw her, I said, I'm sorry for being so rude and impatient with you yesterday. Oh, that's okay. And it may be okay. Maybe she felt like she deserved it, or she did this or did that, or I can't understand why it's okay. She should have just looked at me and said, thank you. Because when somebody humbles themselves and apologizes, you can either slough it off and say, oh, it's okay, it's not a big deal, out of embarrassment, or you can actually rise to that place of grace and just accept it. So how do you deal with somebody when they apologize to you? Do you feel, I have won, I am bigger than you? Or do you feel like, this is embarrassing? How many people have felt embarrassed when somebody else apologizes to them? Yeah. It's embarrassing if somebody comes to you and apologizes. You have to think about, why is it embarrassing? It's one of those moments that if you're living in this place where you should be, which is higher thinking, higher nature person, you would have your wits about you, and you would say, thank you. Then it's accepting the apology, and it's over. Or you can be embarrassed and slough it off, and then the person goes, well, maybe I shouldn't have apologized. Maybe I didn't do something that bad. So there is a real good way to accept an apology. There's a good way. There is a good way. Just like there's a good way to accept someone's cruelty. In that higher thinking plane, you can just look at them and say, that's not right. Just like you can say, thank you. You can object to somebody's cruelty. So, getting off of coffee for a few days, I got all this awareness, which is funny. But I still brought my coffee this morning. Don't worry about it. But I won't have 2 cups, and I'll make sure I eat. Anyway, I think life is so wonderful because every single day We wake up, and it's a brand new adventure. A brand new adventure. A brand new opportunity. A brand new day is dawning. And you can choose to live in this higher nature or this lower nature. But guess what? If you don't choose to live in a higher nature, by basically being still for a few moments and saying, God, here I am. Today I want to work your magic instead of my own evil. Then you're just going to probably end up in this slice of life. And this is where you'll go through your whole life. A lot of people, they spend their whole life within that middle realm, feeling pretty good about themselves. Then there's the super low realm down here, which we don't even want to talk about that, because that's kind of hell on earth. To me, this is heaven on earth, because we're in a higher place. We can enjoy hear the birds chirping in the morning, see the squirrel running down the road and go, isn't that cute? Look at that little guy go. Now me, I try and run him over because I speed up. That was a joke. Just to make sure, because there's some interesting people watching and they have judgments. Now let's talk about judgments. It's a good place to veer off. A lot of you folks have been judging my brother. And it's wrong. What has my father said? Don't judge, so you don't have to forgive. Technically, if you just stay in the middle, in that middle slice of consciousness, you hear the judgments, and you just look at them. And you can disagree. You can say, no, that's not right. But I got to tell you, the choice to bring David back in here, and he's going to come up and talk in a few minutes, was mine. He's been off doing his own thing for a couple of years, and we've had many conversations. But I do believe that sin is important in our life, that making mistakes is important in our life. Because think about it. Think about the prodigal son for a moment. Aren't we all the prodigal son and daughter? Because at that point in time, that son made a lot of mistakes, and he went off into the world, and he did his things, and he tried to be loved by all his friends. But when he finally had nothing, he looked at himself and said, wow. And he made his first decision, his first clear thinking decision of what he should do with his life. So my brother David, to me, is the prodigal son. I am the prodigal son. You are all the prodigal children. We've gone out into the world, we've made mistakes, and we have found that we need to return home by choice. By choice. And then you have to keep making the right choice over and over again to return to Christ. That's why we're here. That's why you're watching at home. Because we made mistakes. Has anybody in here raised a perfect child? I don't think so. I know I tried. Even if you did raise a perfect looking child, that child's not perfect because he's never been able to make a choice for himself. We've all made all the right choices for our children according to God Allen. This is what you shall do. You don't have a choice in this. I'm your father. You'll do as I say. You won't go up against me. I'm your father. I'm your mother. You'll do as I say. You know, I learned here a little while ago. It took me 4 kids. Actually 5, because I have one, somebody else's kid, left him at my house when he was 10 years old, and I've had him 13 years now. He went to the Army and came back. He's like my own kid. when that kid left to go to the Army, I really questioned it. I thought, why am I so sad? I told him not to do it, but he wanted to go to the Army. Then he came back and he said it was the worst experience in his life and the best, all rolled up in one. Because he came back a different man. And he came back a man. They do make men out of young men. And they change a woman too. I know a lot of women that have gone to the Army, gone to the military, I should say. Not that it's wrong. He came back a man. And he came back appreciating life in an entirely different way. But I got to see him leave and I got to see him come back. And now he has made choices. Before he was just existing in this middle realm. And every now and then he'd poke up his head into the higher realm, kind of look around and go, not for me yet, duck back down into the lower realm of just living life in the world. My father has said, I want to be on the world, but not of the world, right? And we have to be on this world. What are you going to do? Go out into outer space? We have to coexist with all kinds of rotten people, good people, phony people, and we hardly can tell the difference between them until such times as you start to live in this realm of clarity. This realm of clarity is where you will learn a whole lot more about life than down in here where all of the Danishes and coffee and good food and nice steaks and fast cars and all that. A lot of people noticed lately that I've been driving this old 73 Blazer. And I've always had fast cars and fancy cars, and I don't know why. I'm driving all my old trucks and cars these days. I don't need anymore the high that I got from my fancy cars and my fancy suits and things like that I've had. I got the suit for free. It's got my name on the inside of it. And they said, what do you want written in the back collar? And I said, huh? They said, we always write a little something private inside the back collar. It untucks. And if you see mine, it says, never forget. And it was because of 9/11 in New York City. I was in New York City shortly thereafter, and I got to do some things with Mayor Rudy Giuliani and the fire chief. And so there's a special thing for me with 9/11 and for all Americans, I think, and people around the world. So for me, it was never forget. But then when I wear the suit, I feel better about myself. And I haven't worn this suit for a while. Barely fits because I'm so fat. But I put it on today because I thought, today's going to be a special day. I'm going to say something good. I don't even know what I'm going to say. It all came to me with the Bruce Lee, I don't fear the man that practices 1,000 kicks one time. I fear the man that practices one kick 1,000 times. And I thought to myself, that's a good jump-off point into my own soul, so I can talk to you guys about something interesting. And really what it boils down to is, how do we learn, or maybe the wrong word is learn, the right word is maybe just, how do we be still and know that He is God? We yield to His greater power. And if we truly yield to God's greater power inside of us, all of a sudden you don't need all those things. Like I made a cup of coffee out of, it's morning, you get habit. Made a cup of coffee, took my first sip, and as I was bringing it up to my face, I looked down into that coffee and I went, there you are. And I took a sip and I went, that's pretty good. And I put it in the cup holder, and I was just conscious of it. It's God conscious. This is going to take me away from you, and I did it, and I drank it, and I was thinking about it all the way here. My dad said one day, what would you do to be closer to God? What would you give up? That's what it was. What would you be willing to give up to be closer to God? Wow. Not one of us is willing to give up much, sadly. Not one of us. We have our things. My friend came in looking beautiful today, and I said, "You look nice." We have our things. Nothing wrong with looking nice. The problem is our relationship with that. The problem is our relationship with coffee, with looking nice, with hairdos, with shoes, with cars, with houses. So now I'm learning how to be objective to all these things. And when you get in that realm of the higher thinking realm, and you are conscious of the relationship to all these things that have always given us this feel good, all of a sudden, I don't get the feeling because I don't need the feeling, but I'm conscious of what it's feeding. Which wolf wins? The one you feed in the battle between good and evil. So, I want to live my life in this slice of consciousness that is the higher slice of consciousness, so that I can live where I'm aware of the Creator and I can be a tool of His and not my own making. My dad says to me last night, "What are you going to talk about tomorrow? How are you going to help people?" I said, "I'm going to talk about, Dad, what you've always taught me, which is to not know until I get there. And that way, it isn't me, it's the Father in me." So all I knew was this one little thing came into my mind, and I said, "Isn't that interesting? That's probably how the devil sees all of us. We've all practiced 10,000 kicks one time, so we're really not good at any of our defenses against the dark side. When all we need is that one kick 1,000 times, that one defense 1,000 times against the dark side, which is returning to the stillness where the Father is inside of us, to where we know that He has no power against us. That is the only thing you need to know. That is the stillness, and that the dark side has no power against you if you are in this slice of awareness, this realm of stillness. That's what the devil fears, is that you know, you be still and know that He is God and that He has no power against you. I'm going to yield the way that I say that we should yield to God's strength inside of us, God's understanding that He puts in our heart, and to that stillness. I'm going to yield to my brother now.
I want to pick up on what Alan was saying about the boat and the storm, because I think there's an important lesson there also. And that is that in fact, he was 11 years old, because I'm 6 years older than him. I was 17, and my whole family got on the boat that day, and we decided we were going to go out to the Channel Islands, which is, I'm going to say it's 20 miles out at least, out from where we lived in Ventura. And I don't think my dad checked the weather that day, which is something that usually happens. You know, we look to see if there's going to be strong winds or whatever. And we got out there, and we anchored, and then the wind picked up. And it was very frightening, because the ocean out there is known to be very violent. You can get 50-foot waves between those islands and the mainland. And that's one of those times where it was really, really horrible. Now, for me, I was 17 years old. You could say I was a renegade, maybe worse than that. But I did not want to go on that trip. I fought it. Like, I don't want to go out there with all those people. Actually, I took my surfboard because I thought maybe I'll do some surfing out there. So it was a little incentive for me to get on that boat. But I didn't want to go, but something said to me, you need to go. And so finally I said, okay, I'm going to go. We get out there and it gets bad. We stay overnight. And the next morning we get up and my dad decides we're going to go in. And I want you to understand something. I want to put this under the category of maybe God is already guiding you. And you just don't know it. Okay? And like Alan was saying about Jack, sometimes you poke your head up and you look around and you go back down because you think you're not ready. It doesn't have to do with any of that. So he decides he is going to take us back into shore, into our marina. And I told him, Dad, you need to let these winds die down. It's crazy. So we started going, and sure enough, there were about 25-foot swells. I mean, it was crazy. It was like, what are you doing out here? We got closer and closer into the shore. And at the time, the marina that we had where we lived, the sandbar had built up out in front of the marina, in front of the jetties. And so there was huge waves. I mean, the waves were enormous. I would say the waves were 20 to 25 feet, breaking on the shore. And the waves were breaking way out in front of the marina because the sand had built up out there. And so these big swells just started breaking, and we could see that we couldn't go in to our marina because the waves were too huge. We couldn't get in. So my dad decides, I'm going to go down to Oxnard, which is only about 5 miles away. So he turns the boat and we're going. But what he didn't realize was that he was too close into the shore. And that these waves were breaking way out. I mean, like a half a mile out. And so this is the way God works, and it's a miracle. I'm 17 years old. I'm just a punk. My dad says, I think we're taking on some water. So he goes down to look at the engine compartment to the bilge. And while he's down there, he says, I want you to steer. Points to me. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is scary. But I took the wheel, and as soon as I took the wheel, I look out, and in surfer lingo, it's called a set, which is a bunch of waves that start to come in, one after the other. Sometimes you have sets of 3, sometimes you have sets of 10, sometimes you have sets of 20. I could see these swells. And because I had been surfing since I was 11 years old, you look at the water and you see how much it rises. You look out on the horizon, you see the water rising, you see it going down. That's how you know the swells are coming in. And so, instinctively, because I'd been surfing so many years, I knew what was going to happen. Those waves are going to break on us. Instinctively, I took and I just turned the wheel, and I went straight out. And here comes those waves. I mean, literally 5, 6, and some of them were actually cresting. That's how close we were to getting swamped. My brothers, my sister, my mom, my friend at the time. We made it out, obviously. But it reminded me, because I haven't thought of it for a long time, that God was already using me. I wasn't a God person at that time, but I did have skill that was needed on that trip. I was the lifeguard. I didn't know it. I was designated because I understood the waves. If I had not been there, I wouldn't be here today. Or maybe I would be, but it wouldn't be in this capacity. But none of my family would have survived either, because when you get rolled by a 25-foot wave in a boat, you're dead. So I just want you to think about that idea, because I was called. Scripture says, many are called, but few are chosen. God calls everyone. He calls all of his children. Every one of us, we have a value in this life. We have a purpose to serve. Sometimes it starts early in your life, and you don't even know it, but you're already being led. And the scripture also says, none can come unto the Father unless he be drawn. So throughout our lives, we have multitudes of moments, of opportunities, where we could say, no, I did this too also. I'm going to take it to a different situation. I think I was 18. And I was going to go surfing this one morning. And something said to me, no, don't go. I said, what? No, don't go. You know what I said to that? Go to hell. I'm going surfing. Yeah, sure enough, I went to the water, paddled out, I caught a wave, and I fell and I hurt myself really bad. And so I'm literally, I don't know what happened to me, but I could barely move. And I washed up on the beach and I'm just laying there looking up and I said, you know what, God? I should have listened to you. I know it now. And then I said something else that mattered a lot. I said, and I don't want to live this way any longer. I don't want to live in fear. Because I'd been hurt a bunch of times before that. At least 2 times before that, really serious injuries. I said, I don't want to live this way anymore. I want you to change me. And that's when it started. That's when I started meditating. And I'll tell you right now, the meditation was on a vinyl record. I had a little record player in my room. Every time that I would try to put that meditation on, I would either fall asleep or something would do this. Zzzz. It would just skip all the way across. Let's start over. I could see that something was trying to keep me from being still, just for a few minutes. But there was a determination. And it almost felt like the more that this something tried to prevent me from being still, the more I determined that I was going to do it. So 3 years in, I'm 21 years old. One day I'm getting there, I'm sitting and I'm meditating, and I see this little tiny dot of light. And I thought, that's the first light I've seen. 3 years I meditated. No light in my subconscious or wherever it was. And I said, there's the light. What my mind thought was, that's the end of the tunnel where I come out of this tunnel of darkness. So I kept meditating and I kept looking and I kept seeing that light every time. Another 2 years goes by and I'm getting closer to the end of that tunnel. Coming out of that dark tunnel of whatever it was, the mind, the thought matrix. Coming out of the thought matrix into the light. And I got closer and closer. And then one day, I emerged from that tunnel and it was snowing light. You know what it's like at nighttime when it snows? You could just see it flittering down. And then I realized, though, this is the beginning of my journey. It wasn't 5 years before. My journey had not started yet. That was the preparation. That's when you get ready to go on your trip through life, being the kind of person that you're living in the light. That's when I started working for my dad. I was a carpenter before that. I was building houses down in Malibu, $1 million homes in those days. I wasn't in my own business. I was working for somebody. But what I saw was that my friends were falling off roofs at the same age as me, breaking their backs. And I realized, you know what, that's not the direction I'm going to go. I'm going to go a different direction. And I left that all behind. And so 40 years later, here I am. But I want you to understand, it started with that one fateful day. The day that I was called and I said, okay, Lord, I yield to you. Because I could have done anything. I could have gone surfing. I could have done anything. It's like, do I really have to go? Yeah, you do. And for those of you who are wondering out there, how is God going to use me? I'm going to tell you, the eye has not seen, the ear has not heard. No one knows the things that God has in store for you, especially as you come to love Him. And the only way you can do that, in my opinion, and in my experience, is you let Him lead you. See, what you talk about faith? What is faith? Is faith knowing where you're going, the roadmap of life? You know everything that's going to happen, you plan everything out? Is that faith? Or is it, okay, let's go. And then it starts to happen. Yes, there's time for preparation for everything. Absolutely. When we went on our boat trip, we spent some time putting stuff in the boat, getting ready to go. I'm not talking about that kind of preparation. I'm talking about when the opportunity arises and you just don't even know, you can't even calculate if the opportunity is what you think it is. There's another point that I want to make. Nothing is what you think it is. Did I know that day I got on that boat that I was going to be the guy that saved my family's life? And if not for me, my family wouldn't be here? Did I know that? You couldn't know that. Because then you couldn't act on whatever was guiding you. You can't know those things. You cannot. God does that to you for a reason. It is all a test. Everything in this life is a test. Every moment. Because every moment is ripe with possibilities. And if you're, and Alan's talking about being aware, but also being aware is a choice. Not something you have to do. I mean, if you look at, like Alan was saying, there's 10 million ways to be distracted. The devil is great at marketing distraction. The devil is an advertising executive, okay? Because they know how to push your buttons. That's what they do. Advertising people are professional manipulators. And they study human behavior. And it's the continuation of war by other means, advertising. I've been there. I've been in that business. I never did bad things in advertising. But you understand that your destruction is being marketed to you all the time. And when you come into this world, you don't have your armor on, so you're vulnerable. And there's people that, because of trauma and suffering that they've gone through, there's an emptiness in there that yearns to be filled with something. So the marketing is perpetual. It never ends. Because even in your dreams, you have images of things that you've seen during the day and little jingos that play in your head. And if it doesn't catch you one way, it's got a net. It's going to catch you another. It's going to throw out a big net. Try to pull in as many people as possible. God does, He does amazing things with the most frail and undeserving of people. And that's something, when I see it, it moves me. Because God is amazing. God does amazing things with everyone. And let me put it to you this way, I'll frame it in a different way. You're here because God wants you here. Think about what I'm saying. I could have died a long time ago. Anything had happened to you along the way. With my craziness when I was young, I could have drowned. I could have split my head open in a swimming pool skateboarding. I could have been in an automobile accident that kills me. Now, there's another story. that's important because it's relative to what I'm saying. I was living by myself, and on this particular day, I was going to go for a drive on a back road. And I got in my car, got all ready to go out, and I got in my car and I started driving. 5 minutes down the road, I have this image of a car crash that happens in my mind. Crash. And I pulled over. Because, see, at that point, I was starting to pay attention. And then something occurred to me. I thought, I don't want to know if that's me. You see what I'm saying? Now, I had a premonition, maybe or maybe not. But my wiser self says, I don't want to find out if that happens. So I turned around and went back home. Those are those moments, and God is always with us, and you don't even see it. He knows what you need at all times. You don't even have to ask for it. And it doesn't hurt, by the way. But you have to also be careful because you could ask God for a lot of things for all the wrong reasons. And what I do in that scenario is I always realize God doesn't serve us. He's not there to serve us. He's not there to give us what we want necessarily. But if you're there to give him what he wants, which is basically just some obedience and some trust, then your life goes differently. Now, I, for all intents and purposes, I shouldn't be here. Somebody like me shouldn't be here. I never set out to be who I am today. I just thank God for this. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Jesus, for what you made me into. I didn't make myself into this. So many are called, but few are chosen. If you're chosen and you don't follow the calling, you'll never know. You just won't know. And then after it's all said and done, at the end, at the sad and bitter end of your life, you will find out then. At least that's my way of understanding it. You know, you have a life review when you go through. And now some of us have amazing experiences, what I call near-death experiences. I've never had one, although I've been unconscious. I never had a near-death experience, but I've really studied near-death experiences. And the things that people come back with are absolutely incredible. Because they have this last opportunity, see, to choose even... There's a guy named Howard Storm. I saw this in 1995 or 6 on Now It Can Be Told. So Howard Storm was an atheist. And he and his wife were on holiday in France, and out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody spoke English out there. He gets sick. He has to go to the hospital. There was a communication gap. They didn't know what was wrong with him. They started poking around, and they couldn't understand. So he lies in his hospital bed and he dies. Now here's what happens to him when he dies. His ethereal self wakes up and he's looking at himself on the bed, his spirit self. And then he hears the voices calling to him, Howard, Howard, come here, Howard. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So he goes out the door and down the hallway. Down here, Howard. Come down here. We've been waiting for you. Really? Okay. Goes down the hallway. It gets dark. Darker. Darkest. And all those voices are calling to him. He finally is in the absolute darkness. And suddenly, things are grabbing at him. But not just grabbing him, tearing at him. And all these creatures come out of the dark and they're just tearing at him. And they're tearing him to pieces. But his realization is, this is it. This is it for me. This is how it all ends. In the darkness, snarling and growling and tearing. But in his mind, there was still a kernel of God. And this is what occurs to him, that little tiny kernel of God that was planted when he was a child. This is what occurs to him. Jesus loves me, this I know, 'cause the Bible tells me so. And as soon as that thought went through him, these things backed up. These creatures of the darkness backed up. And he kept thinking it. He kept knowing it, that it was true. And then he cried out, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't believe in you. And there was an undetermined amount of time where he was just there in the darkness by himself. And then from above, this light comes down. Couldn't see what was in it, and these arms reached out and picked him up and took him out of hell, up into the light where he was shown he'd always been loved. And he has become a minister. He became a minister after that. The most powerful story for me ever. Because the promise of the Bible is absolutely pure. Even though ye be dead, yet shall you live. You think about that, how much God loves us. There's a lot of people that have been rescued from hell in those last moments. Atheists who say they didn't believe in God, but there was something still in them. I read this book one time, probably 8 years ago when I was on a trip. This guy dies of a meningitis of the brain. It's terrible. He's in a coma for 5 days, but while he's dead, clinically dead, he finds himself in this thick, viscous, dark fluid. This is where his consciousness awakens in death. And again, he thinks to himself, is this it? Is this my whole life? He was a brilliant brain surgeon. And the better he became at brain surgery, the more he concluded that the mind was just a bunch of electrical circuits. So before that, he was a good Catholic when he was young. He had thrown out religion and God 20 years ago. Okay? So he's dead, and he's in this viscous fluid. And he's thinking to himself, oh my God, this is it. And then, after being in that condition, he just thought, this is it for me, I'm done. Something inside of him said, no, you're not. And he closes his eyes and he wakes up, and he is in a place that he called heaven. And he said it was like four-dimensional, like nothing he's ever seen in his life. The beauty and the peace. And to this very day, when he wrote the book because he had to tell people that heaven is real. I think that's the name of the book. But there was something in him, and it was just the wondering of it, like, is there more? And God says, yeah, there is more. And there he is, right there. And that's what he came back with, to tell us. So, even though you be dead, yet shall you live, if you have that kernel in you, that little tiny piece, that little missing piece that most people maybe they have it. That's why we shouldn't judge people. Because we don't know what God has in store for them. We don't know what the life that they've lived, we don't know. The pain they've been through, the suffering. We don't know. And that's not for us to even give two thoughts to, unless we want to have compassion. And look at a person who's acting crazy and say, oh, that's sad. I feel sorry for that person. I just hope that they can come out of it.
I did want to mention one thing, because Alan and you're talking about being still. And I know I started many years ago when I was a drug addict, 15 years old, and I heard your dad, and I had a stark change, and I saw light in every time I sat to meditate, you know. But I had a long path, and I fell off of it, you know, several times. But one thing that I saw that in my life, and I'm sure, you know, it happens with other people, I don't, you know, I would think that the darkness is so tricky that in, you know, recently, well, a few years ago, it got me to believe that I had crossed over. So at that point, I couldn't get anywhere. I couldn't, you know, and it was, I had a beautiful miracle happen to me, but it even used that against me, and I let it. So I thought I was at a place. So there, everything stopped for me, you know. So I just see that now it's different, and I really appreciate just being able to, oh yeah, I messed up. Yeah, just, you know, it's kind of like an invention. When you do an invention, you see all these different ways. It's not that way. No, it's better that way. And it's like a whole process, but that's the way it is now with my soul, and that's right. You know, it's not like I arrived. That was crazy.
Well, one of my favorite spiritual movies is The Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves. And the moral of that story is that the devil will get you one way or another. Because in the end, he prevails against somebody who's a child molester, but he does it with pride.
Right.
So the devil still got him. So, you know, pride goeth before the fall. And if you ever think that you're enlightened, God's going to kick your butt. He really is.
Yep.
Because, you know, all have fallen short of the glory of God. We are all, you know, on this level.
And it's not for me to think I'm at a certain place. Just
Well,
live in the moment.
Nothing is as you think it is anyway. So who's really thinking that thought?
Right.
I mean, isn't that what the meditation Be Still and Know is all about? To observe the thoughts. Because the thoughts don't even originate in you.
No.
Now, you can have moments of startling insight, okay? But the best insight and ultimately good insight it's given to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you're listening to the radio and you hear something. Wow, that's great. It's kind of like that where you have your receptor tuned in.
Right.
In the quietness of that moment. That's even when Jesus was meditating on the Mount of Olives. What was he doing? He wasn't thinking, well, this is how I'm going to get out of this. He was just opening himself up to stand in the presence of his Creator, of his Father. Mm-hmm. Right? When we meditate, we don't meditate on, and this is what Alan was saying earlier, you don't need a mantra. A mantra is kind of counterintuitive. Yeah. You know, if you really want to meditate, you want to clear your mind and allow insight to come into you. Because remember, we're all meat puppets. This is meat, okay? This body. This brain, that's meat. Now, it's a sophisticated instrument as well, but the meat can always be affected by things. It can be affected by many things. It can be affected by drugs. It can be affected by praise. It can be affected by criticism. It can be affected by a car accident. You see what I'm saying? There's 10 million ways that the meat puppet can be impacted. And there's only one way to keep that place in you that's reserved from God, and that is to do what?
Be still.
And what I'll do is I'll go back to what I said in the last discussion. That's not a ... That should be a ... That I am God. But I just say, just remember, He wants you to know that I am Him. And I think of that differently because it occurred to me that day when I was talking about it. Know that I am. It doesn't even have to be the last piece, because when you know that God is I am, that's it. That's all you need to know, that He is always. See? Not you, not us. We're all going to fade away. This existence comes to an end. I was reading an article about this the other day, and it said that most people are absolutely terrified of death. Yeah, I would imagine that's true, because this is all we've known. But the article basically says, but death is not, it's like climbing a ladder. Because you're going to die. We aren't made imperishable, but something in us is. So how is it that, if we don't shed this prison, how can we go back to where we came from? To our origin place? Okay? And when we were here in this life, were we doing the things that our Creator wanted us to do? You know, I heard this one time, it was the most profound thing. And it was a book that I was reading. A lady named Crystal McVeigh, who was molested as a child. And horribly, horribly molested, and she ended up being terribly overweight and suicidal and depressed. So she got sick, something happened to her, and she died on the operating table. And when she went to God, into the next realm, she thought, I'm going to tell him, where were you? Why weren't you there to protect me? That's what she wanted to say to God. The anger was still there. You know what I'm saying? God doesn't see this. He doesn't see this at all. He sees this. This is just in the way to him. He knows it because it's in the way to us.
I had a difficult journey. I believed lies. It must have started so deeply as a child that I thought there was no hope for me. And it's hard to live when you don't have any hope. And I had kids, and I told myself, I got to do the best I can. These children deserve that. And my son said to me one day, when I was freaking out, he said, Mom, if you would just be quiet for a minute. He said, the sweetest person I ever met is inside of you. But this monster has you in a cage. And the only time you come out is when you're calm. And that was the first time that I realized I had been believing a lie. Because I trusted him. He always was honest with me.
Yeah.
He never lied to me.
Yeah, I was going to say that whoever, your father was, whatever happened in your life, that set you up not to trust God. Yeah. That's the horribleness of evil, is that as it works through other people, it literally sets you up not to trust your own Creator who loves you more than anything.
It's amazing to me because I'm realizing now how much he does love me, and it took me forever to find that out.
Yeah.
It took me forever, and it took me sitting in a chair. I call it my God chair. I sit in the chair. I would just get so anxious and so confused that I would just sit in this chair. I didn't know what else to do, and I called it my God chair. And I read in the Bible where he said, sit on my doorstep. So I call it sitting on his doorstep.
Yeah.
And something started to change. It's been a slow process.
Yeah.
I don't see any light, and that bothers me, but I have nowhere to go but forward.
Yeah.
I'm not going backwards, but
That's a beautiful story, Beverly.
I just wanted to share with people.
But
to
you
have
see,
endurance.
you said what's important is that you trusted your son. And that moment reconnected you to God after all those years. So you don't know that now, whatever is happening to you, you will affect other people in the good way. And that's how God will use you in this life. Okay? And you know, here's what was revealed on the cross. That there were two kinds of people. One mocked God. If you're God's son, get us out of here. The other one said, I know I was wrong. Will you remember me this day? It's been his whole life. until that moment when he saw that Christ was innocent. That's the kind of people we are. So you have really even up to and even in death. That's how much God loves us. He's not an indifferent God. He's not impersonal at all. He's no Xerxes. Xerxes could kill 10,000 of his own men, which is what Leonidas said, but I would die for one of mine. I would give my life for one of my men. You see? That's the God that we have. That's our God. If you just recognize that, that is the purest form of praise. If you don't need to sit there and say, God is great, God is good, all the singy-songy things, which is fine. But if you just realize how good God is, how great He is, that is praise. That is worship. And that's right there tells you, be still and know that I am. And when you say, Lord, you are, that's praise. Because we only have really one choice in this life, and that is, if we just go the way we are, we're going to go down that path, and the path that leads to destruction, and many go that way. But narrow is the way that leads to life, and few are those who find it. That is the narrow path of recognizing the goodness of God in spite of everything that's ever happened. Recognizing that God doesn't want anything bad for you at all. He wants only the best for you, only good for you, and that you've just denied Him. You know how parents say to their kids, don't go with those kids because they're bad kids. Yeah, I don't care what you say. God is doing that to us. He's parenting us when He tries to communicate to us through our conscience. He's trying to tell us, don't go that way. But if we go that way, it's because we're not listening. So when you come back to realizing that God is there, that our Creator is there, that our great I Am is there, if you see, I am, God, you are. Father, you are.
I wanted to share one more thing
Yeah.
that was important, is that I realized that I thought God felt the same way about me that my father did.
Of course.
Because my father was a bully,
Mm-hmm.
and I was the wimp. Of course, I was this high, and he was that high. And I thought God felt the same way about me.
But
I was wrong with that.
do you understand that anger separates you from love? Now look at the kids that we have. The kids, they don't want to listen to us. We're trying to give them love, and they're pushing us back. So anytime you get angry, and Alan was saying it, it's like I was raging. If you could just watch that part of it, and that's what Be Still and Know is all about. Just get quiet, watch it. The minute you get rid of that anger, because all the emotions can be used to deceive us. Anger is the biggest one, and praise is the second. But see, your anger with your dad made you not be able to trust God. The anger that was there, it wasn't even your anger. You don't have anger. Anger had you. There was another book, Michelle Remembers. Anybody ever read that? In a satanic cult, they wanted to use her as a human sacrifice. But she knew that there was a part of her that they could not touch. Deep down inside. That the devil was all around her, incarnate. And there was something in her that knew that they couldn't touch that little thing that was deep at her core. So, we're all survivors. Everybody's a survivor at one level or another. It doesn't matter. Nobody, like Alan said, nobody has a perfect child. Nobody has perfect parents. Perfect parents don't exist until it's way later in life. And they're not even perfect, but they're better. But that's why you got to let go of the anger, because you don't have it. It holds on to you. The scripture, I think, says, release and you shall be released. You just release. Let it go. It's not worth it. It's just a big brick in a bag of bricks that you carry around that keeps you tethered to this old, horrible world. that's full of deceit and cruelty and horribleness. Let it go. Release, and you shall be released. And that's what's happening to you. That's what's happening to you. Anybody that's releasing is being released. All right, well, thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed my brother Alan and I today.